Mornings in Scottsdale, Arizona weren't like mornings elsewhere. There were no blaring horns, no frantic rush of city centers, but in that stillness, something was on the verge of erupting. The early sunlight stretched across smooth asphalt, brushed the tops of towering palm trees, and stopped in front of a sleek glass building, Phoenix Skyport Private Terminal, a place reserved for those whom most of the world would never meet. A place where a single name could alter the entire flight schedule of dozens of jets. But this morning, no one realized that the man quietly approaching the southern curb of the main building was that very name. No name tag, no bodyguards, no hurried footsteps. Only the sound of wind gliding past the thick fabric of a charcoal trench coat, gently shifting the hem of a man's coat who, if you passed by, you wouldn't look at twice. He looked like a corporate executive leaving an early meeting, or maybe an architect en route to a site inspection. Nothing flashy, no aura, but judging Malik Hunter by appearance alone would be a grave mistake. He didn't need a symbol. He was one. Malik Hunter, founder and largest shareholder of Phoenix Airline, the aviation conglomerate that had quietly reshaped the private market over the past decade, was on his way to board the very jet he helped design, fund, and name, Crescent One. A Gulfstream G700 matte silver body, custom interior inspired by the golden age of civil aviation. Every seat told a story, but this morning no one was telling Malik's story. Not at the check-in counter, not in the VIP lounge, and certainly not at the security checkpoint, where he had passed through using a unique QR code assigned only to strategic shareholders. Malik hadn't spoken a word the entire walk. His assistant, Reggie Sanders, quietly followed a few steps behind, his eyes subtly sweeping ahead like muscle memory. Reggie, a former Air Force tactical specialist, had chosen to work behind someone whose vision reached further than any military radar, Malik. As they approached the aircraft area, everything still looked normal. A technician was checking fuel systems. A catering staff was setting a tray of wine glasses. And in the distance, across the specially coated tarmac carpet leading to the boarding ramp, stood a young man with a clipboard adjusting his tie. His name was Connor Wells, 26, recently promoted flight operations supervisor, known for being strict with procedure and unshakable without proper sign-off. Connor had heard of powerful billionaires, but he'd never knowingly met one, at least not until now. And then, when Malik stepped forward, their eyes locked for a moment that seemed harmless enough. Connor frowned, scanning the modest suit, the lack of luxury logos or ID tags. No platinum membership badge, no shareholder identification, no designer luggage. Nothing that indicated this man belonged in the space beyond the safety threshold. "Excuse me, sir, where are you headed?" Connor asked, voice steady but clear. Malik paused. His gaze didn't shift, neither defensive nor aggressive. He didn't respond immediately. Reggie was about to speak, but Malik subtly shook his head. Connor continued, tone even but firm. "This area isn't open to general passengers. That aircraft is privately owned and doesn't appear on any public manifest. If you don't have an invitation or authorized clearance, I'll have to ask you to leave the area." Still no change in Malik's expression. He stared directly into Connor's eyes, then calmly turned to Reggie. Reggie reached into his jacket pocket and handed over a document set containing the flight manifest, a confirmation email from Phoenix Airline's Coordination Center, and a special operations license signed by the chairman of the board. Connor didn't even glance at it. He shrugged. No ID, no boarding. Connor's nonchalance didn't come from power. It came from a prejudice that had matured over the years, the belief that power always looked a certain way. And Malik, with his plain gray suit, close-cropped hair, worn leather shoes, and unassuming demeanor, didn't fit that image. Malik said nothing. He didn't need to. But Reggie, who had been at his side for 4 years, noticed the subtle shift in Malik's breath. He knew one thing. What happened next wouldn't be about reclaiming a seat. It would be a lesson, not just for Connor, but for a system far too comfortable dismissing real people based solely on appearances. Connor jerked his head toward the back. 2 airport security guards a few yards away began approaching, unhurried but determined, hands hovering near their belts, right over the taser holsters. Reggie spoke again. "Do you want me to call Station Chief Reeves?" Malik slowly raised his hand, like signaling a conductor to stop the music. No need. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of granite. He calmly pulled out his phone, tapped a number already saved. No passcode, no greeting, no confirmation. Just one sentence. Activate Echelon Black. He ended the call. No one spoke for the next 20 seconds. They didn't have to, because when a black SUV appeared at the end of the runway, moving slowly like it was calculating every turn, and two men in black suits stepped out without saying a word, the small world Connor once thought he controlled began to fracture. Connor Wells instinctively stepped back as the two men from the black SUV approached. Their demeanor wasn't overtly threatening, but something about them triggered a primal alertness. They wore no name tags, no security uniforms, yet every movement radiated a kind of quiet authority, the kind recognized only by those who had worked close to real power. "What's going on?" Connor asked, his voice now noticeably less confident. He glanced at Malik, who remained silent like a statue, eyes scanning the scene like a conductor waiting to raise the baton. The taller man in the black suit didn't respond immediately. He pulled out a small metal card bearing no logo, only 3 engraved letters, EIP. Connor didn't understand, but Reggie did. It was an internal code for one of the highest override clearances in the private aviation industry, Emergency Internal Protocol. "You need to vacate this area immediately," the man said. Not loud, but unmistakably firm. "This aircraft is now under direct supervision of the Phoenix Airline Guardian Council." Connor flushed, partly with fear, partly from not wanting to lose face in front of the security team. "I was just following protocol. No one informed me that." "Exactly," Malik said, voice low, neither angry nor insulting, but resonant. "That's the problem." The air seemed to freeze in place. Connor turned to really look at the man he'd just denied. Only now did he notice the way Malik's coat hung with quiet authority, the worn vintage watch on his wrist carrying a weight beyond design, and those eyes. Not the eyes of a man hoping for a ride, but the eyes of someone who could rewrite protocol with a single nod. "You think I don't belong here just because I don't look like the people you're used to seeing in Tom Ford suits with hair gelled like they went to Harvard?" Malik asked, not waiting for an answer. Connor opened his mouth but said nothing. Sweat beaded at the nape of his neck. The 2 security officers behind him subtly shifted their posture, no longer standing with him. They'd understood something. Too late, but clear nonetheless. A soft chime came through Reggie's earpiece. He listened for a few seconds, then nodded toward Malik. "The entire access control system at the West Gate is being rerouted to internal security protocols. All access requests now require Skylink confirmation from the New York office." Connor froze. Skylink, the parent company, the strategic investor of Phoenix Airline. If what Reggie said was true, then this wasn't about denying a passenger. This was about blocking a senior stakeholder from the entire system. Malik stepped forward, still calm. "I've passed through thousands of airports. I've been screened harder than undocumented passengers. I've been asked to prove my identity in meetings I organized myself. But never, never have I had my existence denied with a single look. A look like yours." Connor clenched his clipboard. His back was soaked. I didn't mean it like that." "You didn't have to," Malik replied, gaze steady. "Because the problem isn't whether you meant it, it's that you're so sure of your unspoken judgment." At that moment, an alarm rang out in the control room. The indicator lights turned blue, a color the staff had never been trained to respond to. On the central monitor appeared a short message. "EIP black in effect. Gate 7 lockdown initiated." Everyone in that terminal instantly switched protocol. Crew members were pulled off the aircraft. Ground operations paused and went into standby mode, awaiting instruction from top-level command. Connor looked around, watching his co-workers move as if he were invisible. A receptionist nearby gave him a nervous glance. Someone whispered, "That's him. It's really him." A chill ran down Connor's spine. "What's your name?" Malik asked, though he already knew. "Connor Wells," he answered, throat dry. "Remember it. That name will be mentioned in tomorrow morning's press conference when we announce the full restructuring of the entire ground operations team." Connor's face drained. "Tomorrow? And if this feels excessive," Malik leaned in slightly, Ask yourself why a single sentence from you could trigger a response like a declaration of war, and why someone like you was entrusted with authority in a system like this. Reggie turned to the flight coordinator and gave a signal. Within 30 seconds, the Gulfstream G700's door opened. Two flight crew members bowed respectfully to Malik and Reggie. Connor stood frozen as Malik climbed the steps slowly, each footfall stamping out an old ledger of misplaced authority. Once the door closed, Malik didn't take his usual seat. Instead, he stepped into the cockpit, looked out at the wide runway ahead and said, without a mic but clearly enough, "We're not flying because I was insulted. We're flying to prove that respect doesn't need a suit to be valid." The jet lifted off like a blade slicing into a system that had gone far too long unchallenged. On the ground, Connor remained still, alone, at an airport he once thought he understood. But some lessons don't come from a manual. They come from a look that makes you step back, to finally look inward. At 39,000 feet, Malik sat silently by the window, sunlight scattering across the glass like 1,000 shards reflecting every moment he had been underestimated. The cup of green tea before him remained untouched. No one dared mention it. No one dared approach it. The crew understood. This flight was not merely transportation. It was a declaration. In the cabin, Reggie was sifting through incoming messages. His phone buzzed relentlessly. Each vibration was another shockwave from Phoenix Airline headquarters. News of an unidentified individual being stopped at Gate 7 had already leaked, and now it was spreading like wildfire through dry air. "We have a situation," Reggie murmured as he leaned close to Malik. "The airport coordination team is in emergency session. Someone triggered the internal emergency protocol, but they don't yet realize it was you who authorized it." Malik didn't look up. He was still writing in his black leather notebook, each line precise, deliberate, as if every letter was a foundation stone for what came next. "And Connor?" he asked. "Temporarily suspended, but according to the regional operations director, it's only a precaution. They're reviewing the situation." Malik paused his pen. "Reviewing?" "Yes. They said more information is needed before a final decision. It seems the executive board still doesn't grasp the full scope." Malik's gaze, now colder than the pressure outside the plane's fuselage, lifted slightly. "They have cameras. They have witnesses. They have my word, as the majority stakeholder in the company. What more do they need to understand?" He set the notebook down. His voice was quiet, but it made the entire cabin hold its breath. "The problem isn't that they lack data. The problem is they're not ready to face what the data screams at them. Their system is rotten." Back on the ground in the central operations room at Phoenix Airline's Seattle headquarters, acting COO Harold Munns was locked in a tense debate with the legal team. "We can't let one incident disrupt our entire airport operation. It was an administrative error, not a crime," he barked, palms slamming onto the mahogany conference table. "And even if it was a mistake, we need internal review protocols, not some power play that throws everything into chaos." The chief legal officer tilted his head, responding icily, "You don't seem to understand something, Harold. The person who was blocked wasn't just a regular VIP. That was Malik Jennings, the same man who approved a $480 million investment into Skylink Holdings just 12 months ago. If he pulls out, 37% of our stock value could vanish in under a week." Silence fell over the room. An assistant activated the security feed from Gate 7. The footage showed Connor saying, "I don't care who you say you are. No ID, no boarding." Followed by Malik's gaze, calm, unnerving, a moment that clearly marked the storm's quiet beginning. "So what's the plan?" Harold asked, sweat gathering at his temples. The chief counsel turned toward a silver-haired woman seated at the end of the table. Eleanor Shaw, Skylink Holdings shareholder representative. She opened her leather briefcase, pulled out a file, and spoke without blinking. "The plan is no resistance. The plan is to brace for his call." And just as she predicted, the internal phone rang 3 minutes later, a short but decisive ring. Eleanor picked up. There was no assistant, no hold music, just a steady voice. "Activate the Phoenix Directive. All operational authority now transfers to Skylink. From this moment on, I'm rewriting everything." Harold gasped. "What?" Eleanor gently placed the phone down and pronounced it like a verdict. Phoenix Directive, the emergency restructuring clause enabling a strategic investor to seize control in cases of severe ethical breaches. At the International Terminal in Miami, one of Phoenix Airline's branches, the PA system had just finished an announcement when every flight information screen flickered and updated. All departures delayed by 60 minutes due to system adjustments. We apologize for the inconvenience. A ripple of confusion spread from passengers to staff. No one was given an explanation. No one knew why, but everyone felt it. Something was very, very wrong. Back in the sky, Malik set the notebook aside, turned slightly and asked Reggie, "Do you know what angered me the most? Not being denied boarding?" "No," Malik replied, his voice sharp like metal scraping stone. "It's that they thought I'd let it slide, that I'd just shake my head, walk away, and let them continue their silent engine of bias untouched." He stood and moved to the cabin monitor, switching on the Skylink internal map. Branches lit up on screen like red beacons in the night. "Each one of these," he pointed, "has at least one Connor, and at least one Jamal, the airport guard who saw me today, but couldn't say a word." Reggie looked at him. "So where do we begin?" Malik smiled, not joyfully, but like someone who had waited far too long for this exact moment. "We start with the place that forgot who I am." Phoenix Airline's headquarters in Atlanta seemed to be gasping for air in the heavy southern noon heat. Outside, the scorching sun beat down on an eerily quiet parking lot. Inside, the air was thick with tension, so heavy that every footstep felt measured, as if one misstep could detonate the entire building. On the 21st floor, usually reserved for high-level closed-door meetings, people were gathered, but no one was sitting still. The regional operations director, deputy head of HR, head of flight safety, and the legal counsel were all present, along with someone no one expected to see. Evelyn Hargrove, the representative of Skylink Holdings, who only appeared when the situation was serious enough to warrant a complete leadership purge. No one dared ask why she was there. Everyone knew. The order had been given, and the person behind it, the man they once thought of as a silent stakeholder, was now speaking in the only language they couldn't ignore. Action. The screen in the room lit up. No Zoom, no PowerPoint slides, just one sentence. Phoenix Directive, Level 1 activation, full operational authority transferred. Evelyn stood. "I won't waste time," she began. "The current executive in charge has officially transferred temporary operational authority to me. Until every act of discrimination, ethical misconduct, and system negligence is fully investigated, all Phoenix Airline operations will be either paused or placed under direct oversight." A gray-haired man across the table stood abruptly. "We need to know what's really going on. Is this all because one employee stopped the wrong person?" Evelyn didn't blink. This isn't just about Connor. This is about this entire headquarters, a place where wrongdoing is considered protocol, where disdainful looks are trained like a skill, where internal reports get low priority tags or are completely ignored. And now you're all paying the price for every single one of those looks. Downstairs in the employee lounge, Jamal, the young security guard who had witnessed everything that morning, sat silently before a small monitor. He didn't speak. He simply watched the surveillance footage showing the hallway where Malik had been stopped. There were no raised voices in that moment, no protest, just a silence heavy with weight. Jamal remembered that man's eyes, not angry, not pleading, but eyes that had grown used to being dismissed. So used to it, in fact, that they no longer reacted. But this time Jamal knew. Those eyes had made a decision. "You seen this?" a coworker asked as he approached. Jamal nodded. He didn't say anything, but the whole system started shaking. The other man shook his head, visibly unnerved. "I heard all domestic pilots this afternoon were ordered to turn back. Something big's coming." And something big indeed was coming. In New York, at the Hudson Terminal branch, dubbed the commercial heart of Phoenix Airline, departure screens simultaneously glitched. A strange message appeared at every boarding gate. "Please remain calm. We are rebuilding a better system. Thank you for your patience." No company name, no signature, but everyone could sense it. Something irreversible was underway. Connor was now sitting in a private conference room across from a legal representative from Skylink. Sweat was pouring from his brow like rain. In front of him was a thick file stamped in red. Evidence of discriminatory conduct. Inside were surveillance screenshots, audio recordings of his condescending remarks to passengers, and reports from junior staff, those he had belittled, mocked, and brushed aside like weeds. "I didn't mean it," Connor said shakily. "I was just following protocol." "What protocol?" the lawyer shot back. "What protocol gives you the right to deny a passenger because they don't look like someone who owns a private jet?" Connor had no answer. Elsewhere, Malik stood before a massive window at Skylink's San Francisco headquarters. Outside, the city raced through sunset. Inside, a screen displayed a map of all branches that had received shutdown directives. 17 locations, Reggie said. "All confirmed. They're awaiting next steps." Malik simply nodded. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need slogans. Because the truth was shouting on its own. This system had gone unchecked for far too long, and this time, the person correcting it was the one they refused to let board the plane. Reggie slowly placed a folder on the table. "This is a list of 27 frontline employees who filed complaints of discrimination. Ignored. All marked as non-urgent in HR's system." Malik picked up the folder. He flipped through it. Each line was a forgotten story. Each person, a pain unacknowledged. And then he whispered, "None of them needed me to rescue them. They just needed someone to listen, and I'll be the first to truly hear them." The 28th floor of Skylink's Atlanta headquarters had always carried with it an invisible air of power. Here, bulletproof glass lined the perimeter. The meeting table stretched nearly 10 meters of solid walnut. White light illuminated just enough, and the gray leather chairs had never welcomed anyone without an official invitation. But that morning, the once untouchable sanctuary of senior leadership had become the stage for one of the most consequential moral and power reckonings in the history of American private aviation. When Malik entered, no one stood to greet him. Not out of disrespect, but because no one knew what was coming next. Across the table sat familiar faces. Kyle Thornton, National Operations Director, pale and stiff. Elise Monroe, head of HR, tapping nervously at a tablet she wasn't really looking at. Roger Beck, the seasoned legal advisor, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. And finally, chairman of the board, Alan Devers, the man who once proclaimed, "Skylink doesn't need reform because we don't have systemic issues." Today, those words lay bare on the table like a joke no one dared laugh at. No one said a word as Malik placed a black leather briefcase on the table, opened it slowly, and pulled out a document stack thicker than any material they had ever reviewed. He set it in front of him and gently slid it toward the center of the table. "I call this a living indictment," Malik said, his voice calm, like still water before a storm. "Not for a courtroom, for all of you." Alan raised an eyebrow. "We need clarity on the purpose of this meeting, Malik. It appears you're bypassing several managerial levels." Malik's expression didn't change. "Number, I'm going straight to the source." He gestured toward the file. "This contains 84 specific cases of ignored discriminatory behavior, including employee reports, security camera footage, internal emails, and unauthorized recordings of team meetings. But honestly, we wouldn't need even a fraction of that. One single case is enough to collapse the foundation you've allowed to rot for far too long." Elise looked up, trying to steady her voice. "You know that any accusations must be reviewed through our internal—" "And who reviews them?" Malik cut her off. "Did you know that in the last 6 months, every single complaint filed at the Atlanta headquarters was filtered out before reaching upper management? Who decides which claims are serious enough to merit attention?" The question landed like a blade, slicing through the already brittle silence. Roger Beck flipped rapidly through the file in front of him, beads of sweat dripping onto his collar. "I need to verify the evidence." He didn't finish the sentence. Malik pressed a button, and the large screen behind him lit up. Footage from security cameras clearly showing Connor, the morning shift supervisor, pushing Marcus's hand away as he tried to present valid documents. Then came footage of Brent, another employee, mocking a black passenger in a perfectly legitimate boarding scenario, accompanied by a note that the passenger's complaint was later dismissed without investigation. The room turned ice cold. Then Malik turned to Alan, the chairman. I'm not asking you to resign. I don't need apologies from people who've never thought they were wrong, but I'm offering you a choice. Either the entire middle management structure is dismantled and rebuilt under new standards, or the entire system will be placed under Skylink's control as a culturally failed company. Alan shook his head incredulous. You can't unilaterally enforce that. Malik pulled out another document, an official letter of authorization from the chairman of Skylink Holdings. Red seal, original signature, clear language, full authority granted for cultural and personnel restructuring, including temporary operational suspension and internal reappointments. This is no longer a choice, Malik said. This is a ratified directive. No one had anything to say, only the sound of pages turning. Then a scoffing laugh echoed from the end of the table. Kyle, this world's gone insane, he muttered. Now all it takes is the right face and the right silence to bring down a whole system. Malik stared directly at him. It's not the face, it's what's behind it. And the silence you're mocking? That's the loudest voice you've never been refined enough to hear. Kyle went quiet. Malik stood, calmly gathering his documents. This meeting is over. You'll all receive a detailed update this afternoon on personnel changes in the new oversight framework. And to be clear, this isn't a purge. It's a restoration. Then he left, leaving behind a boardroom frozen in time. Those who once laughed with confidence now sat breathing heavily, stripped of power, stripped of reaction. As Malik exited, his phone vibrated. A message from Reggie. HR office in Miami sealed. Evidence found of at least 12 concealed discrimination complaints. He didn't reply. He simply looked out through the vast glass window where Phoenix Airdyne's aircraft were now grounded, unable to take off. One of them, not long ago, had refused to let him board. But today it was they, who had been denied departure. Under the dim amber lights of the Central Operations Hub, the main screen blinked red with an alert. Eclipse protocol initiated. The room, usually the heartbeat of Phoenix Airdyne's National Flight Control, seemed to lose all breath. Everything, checklists, navigation signals, takeoff schedules, froze in place, as if gripped by an invisible force. But the man tightening his grip around this giant machine wasn't shouting. He didn't need to. A single command, and the entire system bent to his will. Malik Rowe, the same man who had been escorted off the tarmac minutes earlier like an intruder. On the operations floor, Kyle Harrison, National Director of Coordination, stared at the override alert. One hand clutched the strap of his headset, the other trembling as he pressed the comms button. Mr. Rowe, confirming that you have... But the other end had already hung up. He didn't need confirmation. He was the confirmation. Across the airport campus, in a separate building, Brent, the clipboard-wielding supervisor, with a dismissive glare for anything outside a tailored suit, still had no idea what was happening. Display boards blinked error messages. Ground staff abandoned inspections mid-task. Boarding gates locked themselves. Brent stammered to a security officer, "What the hell is going on?" The man sighed. "Looks like someone just pulled the plug on the whole company." Then he stared Brent down and added in a low voice, "And that someone is the guy you refused to let board his plane." Brent couldn't believe it, couldn't accept it. That man in the plain coat with dusty shoes and no entourage, him, the CEO. Then his phone vibrated. An emergency email. The subject line sliced through him like ice. "All flights suspended. Report to room 404 immediately." "No, please. No, thank you. Just an order." In the conference room, Malik did not sit. He stood. Across from him were the executives who had built a system they now couldn't even control. Beside him stood Lionel Price, now officially Chief of Cultural Reform, silent, still, like a shadow watching the room breathe. "We're not here to debate," Malik said, his voice low, steady, but cold as tempered steel. "We're here to redefine reality. No lengthy presentation, just a button press." The rear screen lit up with 3 images. Brent blocking access, Brent waving off legitimate documents, Brent calling security, then transition, a data chart, ignored complaints, missing reports, notes labeled defer, not urgent. You think this is a crisis? Number, this is a result of blindness, of arrogance, of organized silence. Each word dropped like a spike through the table. No one interrupted. No one dared breathe. A knock at the door. Isabel, the chief ethics commissioner, entered and handed Malik a sealed folder. 72 reports filed within 24 hours of your action, she said, and counting. Malik laid the folder on the table but didn't open it. We don't need to count the wounded. We need to stop the bleeding. He turned to Brent. And that begins with removing the people who've taught others to believe respect must be begged for. Brent's face drained of color. I didn't know. You knew, Malik interrupted. You looked at me and thought, no badge, no VIP tag, no one important, and you acted just as this system taught you to. I don't blame you alone, but I do not forgive. He turned to Kyle. I need all executive-level personnel temporarily stripped of hiring and promotion authority. Lionel will evaluate each of them. Not a match? They leave the organization. Kyle's voice shook. We'll cooperate. No, Malik said. You'll be held accountable. He paused. My silence that day wasn't weakness. It was your last chance to realize who you were speaking to. You chose to look away. Now I don't need to say anything at all. He pressed another button. The screen shifted. The old Phoenix Airline logo faded out, replaced by a new name, brighter but firm. Nova Air. Below it, a tagline appeared in bold white on black. We rise right. No applause. No one dared. When the meeting adjourned, the air in the building was heavier than a funeral. Brent stepped into the hallway, the confidence once in his eyes now utterly gone. Employees looked at him, then turned away. Even the janitor didn't nod. He was no longer staff. He was a warning. As for Malik, when he returned to his office, he simply opened a window. Outside, the sun was setting. The flights were grounded, but he didn't need to take off today. He had shaken the system without stepping onto a single plane. It was a strangely blue Monday morning in Denver. But inside Nova Air's headquarters, no one was looking out the window. The entire 17th floor, home to HR, training, and complaints, buzzed with clacking keyboards, anxious glances, and trembling hands finally daring to type out what had been buried for years. 48 testimonies were submitted in just the first 2 hours. By noon, the number had reached 126. Nova's newly launched anonymous intake system, an email address titled simply Truth, wouldn't stop pinging. And in each email, a fragment of memory, a wound, a truth long buried. Lionel Price, now officially the head of cultural reform, didn't read reports from dashboards. He walked barefoot through every floor, every department, every break room, every corner that had once been nothing more than a resting place for silent exhaustion and bottled-up rage. He carried no iPad, no camera, no assistant, just an old leather notebook and a single question. When did you feel unseen? In the basement, a maintenance worker named Antonio, who had been reassigned after reporting racial discrimination, quietly adjusted a valve, then sighed. I used to think that if I just did my job well, I'd be recognized. But somehow my skin color always arrived before any of my technical data. Lionel said nothing. He wrote, in the internal lounge, Jasmine, a seasoned Asian American flight attendant, recounted the time she was told to smile more after her father's death. No one asked why. They just reminded her to stay on brand. Lionel jotted down 3 words: invisible pain. In the main kitchen, Jordan, a warehouse employee, admitted he had worked 30 consecutive night shifts as punishment for non-cooperative tone after refusing to call a white supervisor sir. Lionel underlined one term: silent hierarchy. The stories poured out like a broken dam. People once thought of as tough now sat on metal chairs, hands clenched tight. They didn't cry. They testified. They recounted every averted glance, every veiled insult, every report that vanished from the system as if it never existed. And Lionel wrote, not to archive, but to transform. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Malik was reading through the compiled findings from the internal investigation team. Before him was the skeletal map of a decaying structure. Managers covering for each other, employees silenced by fear, and whistleblowers labeled as troublemakers. No one said it aloud, but the company had run on a single belief that with enough politeness and stability, every crack could be wallpapered over. But now those cracks were rising to the surface like smoke from underground. Marcus, Malik's trusted aide, entered with a short report. This is the first batch of data from Houston and San Diego. Includes video clips, handwritten letters, internal memos. Malik didn't open it right away. He turned to the glass window where one of their aircraft sat grounded on the tarmac. You know what the worst part is? It's not what they did. It's how they convinced each other it was normal. Marcus didn't respond, but he knew, because he too once believed that it's better to stay silent. That silence was now cracking, and from that crack, the truth was flooding in like a storm. That afternoon, an internal meeting took place in the secondary hall. No cameras, no media, no banners. Just 22 employees who had once been suspended or reassigned after filing complaints. They didn't know why they had been invited, only that CEO Malik Rowe would be present. When he walked in, no one stood, not out of disrespect, but because they still didn't believe he was real. No one here owes me their trust, Malik began, but I owe you an apology on behalf of a system that kept you silent for far too long. Then he paused, a long moment. Today isn't for me to speak. Today is for you to be heard. A thin man around 50 raised his hand. If I speak, will anyone listen? Malik nodded. I will, and I will act. And he spoke. Then the second person, then the third. And by the time the 22nd finished, it was night. But no one left. They stayed just to sit in a room where, for the first time, no one told them to tone it down, protect the brand, or let HR handle it. Night fell. The Nova Air building still glowed with light. In a small room at the end of a hallway, Lionel placed 117 testimonies on Malik's desk, each marked with verified, action required. Malik said nothing. He opened each file, read, and marked. And then finally he spoke. Just one sentence. It's time to return presence to those who were turned into shadows. The next morning, a single email was sent to the entire Nova Air internal system. Subject line, realignment. No background, no colors, just a short paragraph. Today, departments will partially rotate roles. Executives will observe operations. Entry-level staff will attend strategic meetings. Those once ignored will now be heard. We will no longer measure value by title. Signed, Malik Rowe. Skepticism spread quickly. At the Denver headquarters, the regional VP, known for always arriving late and never eating in the company cafeteria, was assigned a week with the customer service call center. Meanwhile, Laney, a brown-skinned check-in agent who had twice been removed from promotion lists without explanation, was invited to the Recruitment System Reform Council. In Miami, one of the most frequent whistleblowers, a maintenance engineer named Wesley, was designated as an observer in the leadership performance reviews. And at the Houston branch, the executive training auditorium, previously reserved only for upper management, was now open 24/7 to all employees. A new banner on the wall read, "No one may sit in a seat of power who has never bent low to listen." The result was confusion, initially discomfort, but gradually change. At Denver, a private meeting was held between senior executives and 4 employees whose complaints had once been dismissed. Malik did not sit at the head of the table. He chose the middle, literally, executives on the left, employees on the right. Then he spoke, "Today we are not here seeking forgiveness. We are here to face truth." Annette, a black flight attendant, once denied a chance to transfer to international flights, looked directly at the VP of operations and said, "You once told me I lacked the necessary softness, but when a passenger collapsed mid-flight, I was the one who revived him, not you." No one defended the VP. Malik simply asked, "Does anyone here believe that comment was appropriate now that you've heard what really happened?" Not a single hand was raised. A senior administrator, for the first time in her career, whispered an apology. "I thought it was just stylistic feedback, but I was wrong." In San Diego, a new training session called The Reckoning was launched. Each manager had to sit in the role of a dismissed employee and receive direct feedback from the person they once rejected. Every session was recorded. No rebuttals, no justifications. Every statement began with, "I felt," and ended with, "I don't want this to happen to anyone else." Each word pierced the air like a needle puncturing pretense. On the 19th floor, home to training and evaluation, Adriana Torres, the woman who once cried after learning she had unknowingly signed off on firing a whistleblower, was now redesigning the entire onboarding model. Gone were the colorful videos about company history or leadership vision. In their place were real interviews with real employees, telling moments they felt invisible or judged unfairly. One standout video was now required viewing. Brent that day, standing before the jet he refused to let Malik board. The video had no subtitles, just audio. "I don't care who you say you are," followed by Malik's calm reply, "That was your first mistake." No soundtrack, no effects, just the stark contrast between arrogance and dignity. Later that afternoon at the Executive Council meeting, Malik presented a new plan titled The Witness System. No one had expected it. The premise: every department must have at least one designated observer, not to judge or evaluate, but to witness. Their job: to note every action, from subtle signs of contempt to shady promotion decisions. They had no authority, but they had eyes. And this time, the eyes wouldn't shut. Kyle, the former head of Ascendare, now under review, raised a hand. "Don't you think this will go too far? It might make staff afraid to work." Malik looked at him, not harshly. "They've already been afraid, Kyle. Afraid to speak, afraid of being dismissed. Now it's time for those who made them afraid to feel it themselves." That evening on the ground floor where the tech team was having a late lunch, Malik appeared without warning. No one stood up, but this time someone spoke. "Mr. Rowe, thank you." Malik simply nodded. "I don't deserve those words, not yet, but you all deserve better, starting now." Behind him, the building's monitors began to display a new message, replacing the old flight updates. "The old order is not being overturned out of hate, but because we've been patient for too long." 9 a.m. A seemingly ordinary click at Nova Air's Minneapolis office triggered what insiders later dubbed the second wave. The whistleblower system, Whisperline, had been live for less than 48 hours before it was overwhelmed. Over 300 messages flooded the internal inbox from individuals who had never dared to speak up. Each line was a microcosm of social indictment. Offhand remarks from superiors, silent rejections, headshakes absent from records, but etched into memory. A senior flight attendant from the Austin branch recounted being asked to change her name on flight records because Chinese surnames aren't customer-friendly. A technician in Phoenix described colleagues pretending not to understand English when he requested assistance checking aircraft brakes. A black female employee in customer feedback revealed that her report had once been thrown into the trash by her manager in front of the entire team. Each story was encrypted and categorized into 3 levels: incident, behavior, system. When Nova Air's internal map displayed the number of reports by region, the entire executive floor fell silent. Not out of surprise, but because they finally had evidence. In a nondescript workspace, no logo, no nameplate, only a whiteboard with the words, "Culture Audit." Malik Rowe sat with 3 key members: Lionel James, head of cultural transformation; Adriana Torres, head of training; and Kyle, former COO, now restructuring advisor. On the table lay a thick dossier, over 700 pages of witness reports. No distinction by role, title, or department, all arranged by the degree of unignorable. A clip played, footage from a meeting the previous month, where Brent, the man who once blocked Malik, mocked an LGBT employee for proposing gender-neutral uniform policies. No one objected. Now all of it was displayed on the screen like a vivid stain. Malik said nothing. Adriana activated a recording. Another clip, a veteran pilot admitting he had been warned to avoid flying with black captains, their trouble. On the 17th floor, technical department, a new bulletin board was erected. No decorations, no PR, just the title, "You have been heard." Below were anonymous stories selected for training illustrations. An Indian engineer recounted being deemed dangerous for suggesting safety improvements. A baggage handler recalled being labeled too emotional merely for refusing night shifts to care for his child. Each story concluded with a bold blue line, "Thank you for not staying silent." For the first time in the company history, someone took a photo of the bulletin board to send home. Meanwhile, the media began to sense upheaval. But Nova Air held no press conferences, no press releases. They quietly updated the internal policies section on their website, adding a new clause. The right to speak up is a performance evaluation criterion. A simple image appeared on the landing page. Two hands, one light-skinned, one dark-skinned, typing on the same keyboard. On Twitter, an anonymous account reposted a message from Nova's internal system. "If you feared speaking, it wasn't you that failed. It was us. Let's fix that." Within 24 hours, it was shared over 80,000 times. HR forums, LinkedIn, Reddit were flooded with Nova-like stories. From Houston to Boston, the HR wave spread. Hundreds of employees from other companies began submitting applications to Nova Air. Malik wasn't in his office when this happened. He was at a secondary airport in St. Louis, where a group of technicians requested a private meeting. They led him into an old maintenance hangar, turned on a dusty projector, and displayed a series of internal camera images, evidence of gossip, discrimination, silent refusals that had occurred for years. Malik wasn't angry, but he said, "Submit these clips to the whistleblower system. No need to wait for me." One of them asked, "So what do we get?" Malik replied, "Not being disrespected anymore. Is that enough?" The man nodded silently. That evening at headquarters, Lionel James drafted a message to the entire system. Subject, "From exposure to construction." It included the line, "We're not looking for bad actors. We're looking for where the system allowed them to exist for too long." Attached was a file, 127 lessons from real incidents, not just to read, but to prevent recurrence. No one arrived late to the meeting. No one dared. At 9 a.m., inside the special boardroom of Nova Air, once the fortress of power for the old Assura executive team, Malik Rowe entered alongside Lionel James and the new head of legal affairs, Ms. Cynthia Hall. On the table lay 3 black folders, no numbers, no names. On each cover, only one line, "Truth needs no explanation." The entire former leadership team was present. Kyle, the former COO, the VP of Human Resources who once dismissed 7 complaints due to lack of evidence, and of course, Brent, no longer a supervisor, now merely a living witness to a broken system. He sat at the far end of the table, pale-faced. No one greeted him. Malik entered with no name tag, no greetings, no pleasantries. Only one sentence. "Let's begin." The large screen lit up. No charts, no revenue graphs, just footage from a surveillance camera, capturing Brent denying access to an African-American technician, saying he didn't look professional enough. This is one clip out of 64 submitted through the anonymous reporting system just this past week, Cynthia said, her voice steady, emotionless. She clicked a button. A slide appeared. Evidence number 7, dismissed complaint, led to technical failure on February 17th. Silence. Malik pulled out a proposal from his briefcase. It wasn't thick, but it carried heavy consequences. A behavioral reformation plan with 3 major directives. 1. Dismantle the entire regional supervision department, replacing it with an independent cultural audit unit. 2. Immediate termination without appeal of 11 employees who had ignored or altered staff reports over the past 24 months. 3. Redefine the role of all middle managers, retaining only those rated as having no violations or concealments of violations. Brent looked up, half defensive. Not all of us were bad. Malik didn't turn around. He simply replied, "True, but all of you stood still when bad things happened. And that is enough." The room froze. The second report was presented by Lionel. Its title, "We Knew, but Were Forbidden to Speak." 127 testimonies. 42 cases of retaliation after reporting misconduct. 19 employees reassigned after speaking out. A video clip played, a testimony from Lisa, a veteran flight attendant demoted without reason. In the clip, her voice trembled as she said, "I gave 16 years here." Not once did anyone ask if I felt respected. Kyle took a deep breath, speaking for the first time in the entire meeting. We lost control. Malik looked at him, not angry, just cold. It wasn't a loss of control, it was a lack of care. The meeting moved into its decisive phase, determining who would stay. Each individual was named, no vote required, one unaddressed piece of evidence, and they were dismissed. Brent, though at the center of the scandal, was allowed final remarks. He stood, voice shaking. "I didn't know it would come to this. I was just doing my job." Malik shook his head. "You weren't doing your job. You were doing what you thought you were entitled to. And then, the choice was given. You may leave today, or stay, and begin again as a front desk associate. No title, no perks." Brent looked around. No support. He sat back down, silent. At the end of the meeting, Malik stood. No papers, no PowerPoint. He simply said, "We allowed names to outweigh values. That ends today. From now on, no one is above accountability, and no one will be left behind." No one dared object. Cynthia closed the folders. Lionel powered down the screen. Malik walked out of the room. As the door shut, the entire floor seemed to hold its breath. Not because a CEO got angry, but because, for the first time, justice didn't have to scream. It only needed someone brave enough to place it on the table, in the light. The next morning, a light rain blanketed the area around Nova Air's headquarters. It wasn't heavy, nor was it sudden, but it was enough to cover the building's glass windows in a thin, foggy film, like a curtain of the past that still lingered. Malik Rowe walked into the hallway on the 4th floor, where the customer service department had recently relocated. He carried no folders. He was accompanied by no assistant, no cameras, no press conference. This wasn't a staged event. It was a conversation, a real moment of listening. The room had been rearranged. No more rows of desks, no podium. In their place, a circle of chairs, and in the middle, a warm kettle of water, teacups, coffee, and a plate of cookies. The air felt more like a therapy group than a corporate meeting, and that was entirely his intention. The people entering weren't directors or department heads. They were employees who had been hurt, those who had once stayed silent, who had endured humiliation to keep their jobs. One was a maintenance engineer who had once been called that unqualified brown guy. Another was a flight attendant who'd been forced to switch shifts for being too loud. Another was a receptionist who'd been written up for not smiling enough. 8 people, 8 different faces, but their eyes carried the same exhaustion, the same cautious look, but also a quiet flicker of hope. Malik didn't start with a speech. He simply sat down, looked at them and said, "I'm not here to apologize. I'm here to take responsibility." The room fell utterly silent. Then someone spoke. It was Carla, a middle-aged woman who had submitted 6 complaints over the years, none of which had ever received a response. "You know," she said, her voice rough, "I used to dream that I was screaming into the hallway and all the doors just silently closed. Every day at work, I told myself, just finish your shift and go home. Don't pay attention. But today, I want to pay attention." Malik nodded. He didn't interrupt. One by one, they began to speak, and slowly the picture came into view, not just of an airline, but of an entire system that had become too comfortable ignoring real voices. Those who had once been silenced were now speaking, and for the first time, they were being heard. Malik wrote down every detail by hand, in a plain leather notebook. He didn't jot notes quickly. He didn't summarize. He wrote down their words exactly as they were spoken, capturing not just facts, but feelings. After 2 hours, when there was nothing more to be said, Malik stood. "I won't promise to change everything overnight, but I will promise you this. Each one of you, and every story you've told, will become a line in the new blueprint of Nova Air." He looked around the circle. "And I want to start with you. I don't need outside consultants. I need real people, people who lived through the old system, to help me rebuild it from the ground up." The engineer, whose name was Nia, began to cry. You Want us to design the very place that broke us? Malik responded gently. No one is more qualified to rebuild a roof than those who've been drenched beneath its leaks. That very afternoon, a special internal memo was distributed throughout the Nova Air system. Its title, Rebuilding from the Root, Giving the Wounded a Chance to Create Solutions. Under the guidance of Carla, Nia, and 3 others, a new group called Witness and Reform was officially formed, not under HR, not under PR, but reporting directly to the CEO. Their responsibility wasn't to investigate misconduct, but to observe and protect the cultural integrity of each hallway, every shift, every policy. And in the basement, where an old storage room used to be, a new space was open. No fancy signage, just a row of chairs, a voice recorder, and a handwritten message on the wall. If you see something wrong, don't stay silent. Someone is listening. The first signs of change didn't come from TV screens or official announcements, but from smaller, quieter things. A shift manager was asked to make a public apology for assigning days off based on favoritism. A supervisor was transferred after being found to exert unnecessary control over his staff. A complaint intake worker no longer greeted reports with disinterest, but instead with the first words, "I'm listening." An internal communications team began documenting the journey of transformation through a series of short videos sent out to each branch like a new cultural broadcast. One particular episode was titled, From the Dark Room to the Circle of Light, recounting that very morning's gathering. There was no background music, no visual effects, just 8 employees and a CEO sitting together and listening. Yet within 48 hours, it had been shared internally more than 20,000 times. At his office desk, Malik received a small envelope, no return address. Inside was a single slip of paper. I used to think I was invisible. Thank you for seeing me. He placed the note inside his notebook, not hidden away, but right on the first page, because this was the beginning of a new chapter. And because tomorrow he would be heading to the Houston branch, the one once labeled the heart of the silence. That morning, the sky above Nova Air's tarmac in Atlanta was cloudless. The early sunlight cast a soft glow across the fuselage of aircraft. In NA001, its matte black paint and gold trim gleamed like a blade reforged. But today was not just the inauguration of a new fleet. It was the first day of a new definition of corporate culture. One not born from high-level meetings, but from old wounds once buried. In the grand hall of the new headquarters, there was no red carpet, no host, no stage lights, just a single standing microphone on the wooden floor and 300 chairs arranged in a circle, where employees from every department now sat. There were no longer borders between engineering, service, administration, or operations. No more hierarchy between supervisors and frontline staff. Malik stepped forward, wearing a simple gray shirt, sleeves rolled high, no tie, no badge. He didn't stand on a platform. He stood in the circle. I'm not congratulating you on having a job, he began calmly. I'm congratulating us on having a chance to rebuild from the beginning and to do it right. No one clapped, but no one blinked. Malik continued. Nova isn't just a new name. It's a promise that every decision we make, from how we greet a guest, to how we assign shifts, to how we conduct evaluations, must reflect this. We fly for human dignity, not just for profit. After the ceremony, every department entered onboarding under a completely new model. No motivational slides, no glossy promo clips. Instead, a series of true stories from former victims of the old system. Each case study included names, dates, context, and a specific section titled, What Should Have Happened? One employee, Adriana Torres, formerly the head of HR, broke into tears during a session, reading an old report she had once signed off without intervention. A black mechanic had been fired for uncooperative attitude after reporting racial discrimination. I signed that termination order, she said, choking back tears, without asking a single question. Now it is Adriana herself who is rebuilding the entire intake and whistleblower protection process within the new system. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor of the Technical Operations Wing, Jamal Ellis, the former security guard who had once watched Malik be denied boarding, was officially named head of ground operations. His speech was short, but it made the entire room rise to their feet. I once stood still while witnessing injustice. Now I stand here to ensure it never happens again. Not on my watch, not under my command. That afternoon, in a closed-door meeting with the internal creative team, Malik issued a clear directive. No hero music. No glorified CEO montages. Tell it through real eyes, real pain, real faith, he said. If we're proud of anything, it shouldn't be strategy, it should be humanity. A large poster was hung in the main hallway. No one should have to scream to be heard. Beneath it, portraits of 3 employees, a brown-skinned flight attendant, a transgender kitchen worker, and an aging technician, people once passed over in every promotion cycle. On the 3rd day following the relaunch, a secret inspection team from Skylux Holdings arrived to evaluate Nova Air's operations. Unlike previous visits, they didn't just review flight logs or maintenance checklists. They randomly interviewed employees, from baggage handlers to baristas, asking one central question: do you feel seen and respected? In their 87-page report sent straight to headquarters, one line was highlighted in bold red. For the first time in this organization's history, 100% of frontline employees answered, "I know I'm working for something bigger than a paycheck." That evening, Malik returned to his office. On his desk was a handwritten letter from a former pilot who had resigned, stating he was too tired to keep fighting. The letter read, "Nova reignited something I thought I'd lost. Self-respect. If you'll have me, I want to fly again. Not to manage, but to lead." Malik didn't respond to the letter. Instead, he opened his notebook and wrote one line. "When self-respect is rekindled, everything can take flight." The following morning at 5:42 a.m., the first flight bearing the Nova Air brand rolled onto the runway. Malik, Marcus, and Lionel stood at the edge of the tarmac. As the aircraft ascended, no sirens, no ceremony, only the voice of the tower echoed in the air. "Nova 1, you are clear for ascent." No one spoke, but all 3 men understood. This flight wasn't just transporting passengers from point A to point B. It was carrying an entire generation of silent justice into a new sky. By day's end, in the 7th-floor conference room, once dubbed the Citadel of Indifferent Power, a new team now held its regular meetings. Witness and reform. On the whiteboard in messy handwriting, someone had written, "You don't need to scream, you just need to be believed." A young employee sitting in the corner spoke quietly. "I used to think company culture was just a buzzword, but it turns out it's the only thing that makes me stay, or makes me leave." And today, she chose to stay. Malik didn't board the first flight. He stood on the runway, watching Nova 1 vanish into the golden dusk. The breeze stirred gently, and in that stillness, a little girl ran up beside him. It was the daughter of Jamal, once a security guard, now a head of operations. She looked up and asked, "Mister, are you the one who made my dad stand in front of everyone?" Malik didn't answer right away. He crouched down, smiled, and said, "No, sweetheart. Your dad did that. I just helped people see it." As she turned and ran back, her hair catching the last rays of sunlight, Malik knew. Nova wasn't a company. It was a promise to the next generation. That one day kids like her wouldn't have to prove their worth because of their skin color, their gender, or the circumstances they were born into. Nova's headquarters glowed with a warm light from within, but the warmest thing wasn't the bulbs. It was the gaze of those once forgotten, now rising together to build a new sky. Inside the meeting room, Lionel pinned up the final campaign message on the wall. "You don't rebuild an airline, you rebuild a belief." And for those watching this video, if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been silenced when all you needed was to be heard, if you've ever had to exhaust yourself just to be seen, this story is yours. We hope it stirred your anger at injustice, your satisfaction at seeing fairness restored, your admiration for resilience, and ultimately, your emotion at knowing that some people are quietly changing the world, one conversation at a time, one decision at a time. If you believe in that, like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story, and share it to spread the message that kindness doesn't need a microphone, it just needs to be seen. Thank you for staying with us till the end. See you in the next journey, where truth continues to be told and trust continues to be rebuilt.